And the greatest comedy show on earth, Clown World, put on by the Democrats, continues with this latest revelation of another Democrat who openly wants open borders. Get a load of this communist lesbo skank from Kansas. There she is, Susan Ruiz, Kansas House 23rd District, from Shawnee, Kansas, a suburb of Kansas City. Let's read on, shall we? And just when you thought the Democrats couldn't be any dumber and stupid, get a load of this. Rally calls on Lawrence, Kansas to be declared sanctuary city. Says here hundreds have rallied in a Lawrence, Kansas park to call on city officials to declare the northeastern Kansas City a sanctuary for illegal immigrants who are in the U.S. without legal permission. So let's go ahead and break the law, The Journal World reports that the Friday night rally was organized by a local coalition of Latino activists. In other words, communists, Marxists, socialists. The coalition says more than 300 people signed a petition urging Lawrence city leaders to pass ordinances. In other words, laws aimed at protecting illegal immigrants, including measures to limit local police cooperation with federal immigration and customs enforcement. Unbelievable. State Representative Susan Ruiz, a Shawnee, Kansas Democrat, told the crowd the country needed more sanctuary cities. And we'll get to her in a minute. This comes after U.S. officials announced the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency would be conducting raids targeting undocumented immigrants over the weekend of July 13th. The raids, ICE officials and Vice President Mike Pence say, target thousands of immigrants who have a court deportation order, and they're not going to court like they're supposed to. They just want to break the law. Here I am. The rally raised $1,600 to fund help local immigrants and refugees pay for such things as legal fees, groceries, and transportation. In 2017, the City Commission of Lawrence, Kansas proclaimed Lawrence a welcoming city, but proclamations aren't legally binding. But I want to go back up here and touch base on this for a minute. This state representative, Susan Ruiz, a Shawnee, Kansas Democrat. Let's just see who she is. And just as I suspected, let me show you who this Susan Ruiz is. Susan Ruiz hopes the rainbow wave carries her to a seat in the Kansas legislature. This is posted on October 20th, 2018. As soon as I read the words rainbow wave, I had my suspicions as to what this was. And I was exactly right. Susan Ruiz's decision to run for office parallels the thinking of so many other people after the 2016 presidential election, meaning Donald Trump. I could either complain and bitch about it, as all of us did. Ruiz was especially angry about how the president spoke of the Latino community, or be much more involved. We can't afford to not vote, but we will need to do something more than that. I wonder what that something is. Violence? Yeah, the communist, Marxist, socialist terrorists. Ruiz is one of two openly gay candidates for the Kansas House of Representatives in Johnson County. She's running in District 23, which includes 21,500 people in parts of Overland Park, Lenexa, and her hometown of Shawnee, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City. Hillary Clinton won this district by double digits, she notes. Ruiz was not, however, an eager candidate. Her efforts to step up to 2016 began with canvassing for a Shawnee City Council candidate. Then she became chairwoman of her precinct committee. This year, when Kansas Democrats wanted to make sure no Republican ran unopposed, that meant finding someone to challenge Linda Gallagher, a friendly moderate with solid support from many of the same individuals and organizations that might otherwise have supported Democrats had any of them run. It came down to the wire, blah, 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 blah. Ruiz was complicated by health problems over the summer when it looked as if she might need surgery for a leg problem. Blah, blah, blah. It helped that she didn't have a primary, and Ruiz got a boost when a victory fund, a national organization that raises money for LGBTQ candidates, endorsed Ruiz along with her fellow Kansas House candidate, Brandon Woodward, a congressional candidate, Sharice Davids, who are all Democrats, communist, Marxist, socialist, terrorist, mind you. Seeing how many more LGBTQ people are running, it's not just a blue wave, it's a rainbow wave, Ruiz says, echoing the Victory Fund slogan. Jesus. Pathetic piece of shit scumbags is what they are. But as Kansas Democrats begin their long overdue process of building not just a deeper bench, but any bench, that rainbow wave has brought complications. I'll call them growing pains for Kansas' tiny LGBTQ political infrastructure. Ruiz's opponent Gallagher has been so supportive of the LGBT causes that state LGBTQ advocacy organizations, has endorsed Gallagher over the openly gay Ruiz. That's because, amid the grueling and frequently ugly machinations of every Kansas legislative session, elected officials often take big political risks to support LGBTQ community. I don't support none of you. Because you're all a bunch of fucking communists, that's why. A bunch of dimwit, bullshit communists. And the only reason that you're coming out is to get a few more votes. You don't give a shit about Kansas, or you wouldn't be sitting, or the United States, or you wouldn't be advocating for open borders. Everything's just going to be hunky-dory. Unicorns and fairies with you little dipshit Democrats, isn't it? I got no use for none of you. What a piece of shit communist. So now they're trying to ruin Kansas. Originally from Houston, that figures, Ruiz earned a master's degree in social work and moved to Kansas 25 years ago. Her jobs at community mental health centers have given her a street-level view of how public resources do and don't serve the whole public. Jesus. And you can read on through. I'm not even gonna. Oh, I like this. Now she's gonna blame the Republicans again. Her direct experience of how state government affects real people, including being laid off from a job at the Wyandotte Center, that's Wyandotte County, Kansas, Center for Community Behavioral Health Care, after Sam Brownback, who was a Republican, was elected in 2010. Before he became governor, he met with leaders of 26 community mental health centers of Kansas, and right off the bat, he told them he was going to cut $10 million off the budget for mental health, and he lived up to that promise. Ruiz navigated the recession by taking another job at a much lower salary before landing at Truman Medical Center, where she manages a team of caseworkers and a nurse. Thanks to the relatively open-minded people who gravitate to social work, Ruiz says she's never encountered problems at her job because she's gay, queer, whatever. Jesus Christ. Yeah, they look like a couple of skanks. Couple of degenerate communist skanks. I don't support you or anything else you're talking about. Open borders. All this LGBTQ bullshit. My dad grew up in Mexico. I don't know all the details, but when he was in his 20s, there was a big shortage of men to work in industries. Dad was recruited with many other men who came from Mexico to work for the Southern Pacific Railroad Company in Houston. I mean, it's just these fucking people. They're all fucking idiots. Yep, you're a fucking idiot. Susan Ruiz, Democrat, communist, Marxist, socialist, terrorist. I don't see you too worried about all the people killed by all the illegal aliens and MS-13 gang members, though. Do we, Susan Ruiz? LGBTQ, whatever you are, weirdo. You're not too worried about them. How about them people that were killed out in Colorado when that illegal immigrant driving that truck took out 28 cars and killed 4 people? Huh? You ain't too worried about that, are you? How about the illegal immigrant that ran over 10 Harley riders up in New Hampshire? 10 of them. Killed 7 of them. Not too worried about that, are you? Just too bad, huh? How about all the other accidents that these illegals cause with their drunk driving, murders, child trafficking? Don't hear a word out of you communist Democrats about that, do we, Miss Susan Ruiz? What a piece of shit. So this Democratic communist LGBTQ lesbo in Kansas is all for open borders and just whatever comes across the border. And everything's going to be hunky-dory, unicorns and fairies. The one thing you don't hear any of these Democrats, communist liberals talk about is how many Americans are being killed by these illegal alien immigrants. Let's take a look, shall we? The photos you're looking at here are of the May 2019 Denver truck crash, which involved an illegal alien here illegally that could not read, write, or speak English. Say it again, could not read, write, or speak English. Was driving a commercial truck, passed a runaway truck ramp after he lost his brakes and went into the city of Denver going eastbound on I-70 and plowed into 28 vehicles, stopped at a previous accident and took out 28 vehicles and killed 4 people and set fire to numerous vehicles because his truck ran away from him. You will not hear any of the Democrats or the Susan Ruiz talk about any of this or point any of this out. The less you know, the more it gives fuel for her phony agenda. Open borders. LGBTQ bullshit. Remember that. 4 people lost their lives. 28 cars wiped out. And let's not forget the harrowing experience and scene in New Hampshire of June 2019 when an illegal alien, 23 years old, driving a pickup truck pulling a large trailer, ran over 10 Harley riders, killing 7 of them on a way to an event in New Hampshire. Turns out, he too is an illegal alien. Killed 7 Harley riders, ran over 10 bikes. Because people like Susan Ruiz, the Democratic, Communist, Terrorist, Socialist, do not give a shit about you Americans. They think this is all fun and games to them. And you won't hear anything out of Democrats like Susan Ruiz about any of those accidents where people were murdered and killed. And it's a lot worse than what you think and what they'll have you believe and tell you. And I'm going to show more of that here in a minute. You won't hear any of these communist, Marxist, socialist, terrorist Democrats talk about any of this because they don't want to expose it. They don't want you to know their true agenda, the invasion of America by all these criminals and child molesters and rapists and murderers. Not one word out of them about that. Not a word. Also, think about this. You don't see any of these Democratic, liberal, communist, Marxist, socialist terrorists come racing to pay for your funeral of your family member that was killed by an illegal alien. You don't see any of them come racing to help pay for the funeral and burial costs of your family members, do you? But they got plenty of money to send to Mexico and El Salvador and all those other countries, and money to send to those special interest groups that advocate for open borders. You won't see any of them come racing to help pay for the funeral or the burial expenses. Not one Democrat, not a single one ever talks about this. Your family member, your child, your mother, your father, your grandpa, your grandmother, your wife, girlfriend, killed by one of these illegal aliens that they just led across the border, whether it was drunk driving or murder. Because they don't give a shit about you Americans, that's why. This is a communist invasion takeover of America. So if you don't mind your wife, your mother, your father, several of your kids, your grandparents, your cousins and nieces dying because of some illegal immigrant, alien that shouldn't have been in this country in the first place, whether he was a gang member, driving without a license and insurance, drunk, whatever, high on dope and drugs. If you don't mind any of your family members being murdered and you having to foot the bill for the funeral and burial costs and the headache and heartache, then just keep voting for these piece of shit Democratic, communist liberals that are advocating for all these open borders. If you don't mind that, then keep voting for them. But you don't see any of these Democratic, communist, Marxist, socialist, terrorist liberals coming to pay for any of these funerals and burial costs. But yet they got plenty of money to send back across the border and funnel into these special interest groups that advocate for open borders. If you haven't noticed that, hopefully you do now. All you have to do is any search engine that you want is go in and type in illegal alien crashes and watch what comes up. Watch what comes up. How many car crashes and accidents that these illegal aliens that are here illegally without a driver's license and insurance and drunk and high on dope are causing casualties out here on the highways. Google search it. Bing search it. I don't care what search engine you use. All you got to do is search it and look at the photos and read the news clips. It is out of control. So if you'd like to voice your opinion to Susan Ruiz, the Democratic Communist Liberal terrorist in Kansas, about how you feel about her open borders bullshit, here's her contact information. Let her know how you feel, and don't be shy about it. I mean, these Democrats want to run for public office and supposedly represent the people. Who's she representing? The American citizens or the illegals down in Mexico that are trying to get over here illegally and think they can get all kinds of free shit and entitlements? She's not representing the citizens of the United States, the Americans. She's representing the MS-13 gang members and those criminals down there in Mexico. That's what she's representing. I'm going to be very clear about that. So she's not here to represent the people of this country. She's here to represent the people of Mexico. The criminals, the illegals, the gang members, the MS-13 gang members, the rapists, the murderers, those in not just Mexico, but Honduras, Guatemala. That's what she's representing. But she ran on the platform to supposedly represent the people of this country. This country, not some other country. She needs to be recalled and voted out. A massive recall against this communist, terrorist, socialist, Marxist terrorist, Susan Ruiz of Shawnee, Kansas. Her ass needs to be recalled, and if any of you would like to file a lawsuit against her, a personal lawsuit for any deaths and bodily injury because of her advocation of open borders, and maybe one of your family members has been murdered or killed by one of these illegal aliens, feel free to contact an attorney and sue the living shit out of her and make it worth a lot of money, into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The more we break these communist, socialist, Marxist, democratic liberals and get into their personal pockets with major, huge lawsuits, the less you'll hear from them. And several of you out there have probably had a family member murdered or killed by one of these illegal aliens. You need to start suing the shit out of these Democratic politicians that advocate for this. They advocate for it and they try to pass bills for it. Let's hold them responsible. Let's hold them 100% responsible for what they're advocating. And you can do that by filing a lawsuit worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Personal lawsuits against these people. There's no way they can run. Get them into court. Dig up everything you can get on them, but sue the living shit out of them. Because the day's going to come when this is going to happen to one of your family members by an illegal alien that shouldn't be in this country in the first place, and this accident would not have happened if ICE could do their job and the police could do their job properly. But when you got these democratic communist terrorists trying to hinder the police from doing their job, this is what's going to happen. This is going to be one of your family members, thanks to these Democrats. And this is what you're going to be left to pay. The burial and funeral expenses, along with the heartache of losing a loved one, due to one of these democratic policies that they're advocating for. It's you that gets to foot the burial expenses and the funeral expenses because of their democratic policies of letting illegal aliens break the law and hindering the police from doing their job. It's you that's going to get to pay the funeral and the burial expenses. You won't see any of these democratic politicians or special interest groups that advocate for open borders coming to help pay for your funeral of your loved one, your wife, your daughter, your son, your mother, your father, your grandparents, your cousins and nieces. You won't see any of them show up at your funeral to hand you thousands of dollars to help pay for the funeral and burial expenses. Not a one of them. But instead they're advocating for open borders and hindering the police and ICE and customs from doing their job. Isn't that right, democratic, communist, liberal, socialist, terrorist, Marxist pieces of shit? Isn't that right? Damn right it is. Democrats wanting to turn cities into sanctuary cities for all their illegal criminals from Honduras and Guatemala and whatever other country. And while you're at it, ask this Susan Ruiz just how many funerals and burial expenses that she's paid for, and how many is she willing to pay for of murder victims and by these illegal aliens that she's advocating come across the border, unchecked, unvetted. We don't know if they got diseases. We don't know if they got criminal records. How many funerals is Miss Susan Ruiz ready to pay for? How many millions of dollars does she have? Because she needs to be held accountable in a court of law. And I'm sure many of you can find a good lawyer that would love to sue the living shit out of her. Because that's what she needs. Needs to be sued. Hundreds of millions of dollars. All of you who've lost a loved one. Start suing her. You won't hear from her filing lawsuits against her to pay for the burial and funeral expenses of loved ones murdered and killed by illegal aliens that she's advocating for come into this country unchecked, unvetted. And that is all for this edition of Democratic Clown World, because that's what it is. Now I'm going to start a whole new series on this Democratic Clown World. These dipshits and morons in the Democratic Party. These pathetic, disgusting pieces of utter shit. Because that's what all of them are. Every single one of them.